When it comes to leading worship, one of the most important parts is going to be the background vocals, but usually not for the reasons that most people think. And so depending on your beliefs, your preferences, or really your vision or purpose for what it is that you're hoping to accomplish in your leading of worship, it really changes a lot in how you view and what you're going to do with the vocals. And in some ways, those vocals may be predetermined to be turned down or buried. But that's an important distinction that we want to talk about today. Are you getting buried or are you getting turned down? And let's talk about that for just a second. So I tell background vocalists all the time, it is my goal for you to never be heard. Now, a lot of people are taken back by that, just like you might be right now. And the reality is that in a perfect world, if we do a great job of leading worship, no one is going to hear you because everyone's going to be singing along and you will get buried by good things, right? People worshiping. That would be great. So if we can hear you, that usually means that maybe we're not doing a great job of leading worship. But like I said, depending on your vision or purpose or preferences, some churches aren't trying to get other people to participate. And so I'll leave that up for whoever it is that needs to make those decisions for your church. But there's a lot of people who say, or the purpose of leading worship isn't necessarily to get others to participate. Now that may seem a little crazy, or it may seem like, yeah, that's what we do. We worship, and then if other people want to participate, then great. But we're here to present the gospel or to demonstrate for them what worship looks like. And then there's sometimes where people are just singing songs that don't have a participation element in them, and they are just sharing the message or inspiring somebody in some way. And so when that happens, yeah, you want to hear those background vocals. And maybe you do, maybe you don't, again, depending on your preferences, which that opens up a whole nother door into what kind of sound are you looking for. And there are quite a few churches who want to sound exactly like the recording. There's other churches who want to take that recording and modify it for another style that they like, but yet that style isn't producing these songs that they like. So I've been to a lot of churches that would fall into that category where they're trying to take a song and modify it into another style. And so some churches that I've been to like a very heavy vocal sound, meaning they want a wall of vocals and then they would prefer the instruments to fit in around them. Well, that's not how the original song was recorded. So when they go to try and play the song like it's on the album and then change it to be with the vocalist, well, it creates a lot of problems because all those instrumentalists are now playing those notes that the other people are trying to sing. And so then it becomes this volume war where who's going to get turned down, who's not going to get turned down. And if you're at a church that's looking for a very vocal heavy sound and you're playing an electric guitar part that's interfering with that or conflicting with that or competing, then you're going to lose and you're going to end up getting turned down. So vision is super important. Now, again, depending on your preferences, there are a few styles of music that would lean heavier on those background vocalists. The first would be Southern gospel that usually has like a 4-part, really tight harmonies, and those are really forward in the mix. And then the next would be what people refer to as gospel music or sometimes black gospel, where you have kind of a call and response, where the leader isn't necessarily who you're following. You're not trying to sing what they're singing. They will sing the upcoming words, usually in kind of a fancy way, and then the background vocalist or the choir then sing what it is that everybody else is supposed to be singing. And so then that is very forward in the mix. Now, when we get to what we are currently having as modern praise and worship, you'll find pretty quickly that the background vocalists are not very prominent. In fact, you start listening to some of those multi-tracks, or if you just listen to recordings, you will struggle to hear the background vocals. And if you even can hear any, you're going to hear maybe one or two. Well, now wait a minute. When we watch the video, you're going to look on stage from the live recording that wasn't really live. They just filmed it, so it makes everybody feel good. You'll see 7 or 8, maybe 10 or 12 background vocalists. Everybody's got a mic and everybody seems to be singing, but yet that's not coming through on the recording, and that's because the current style of modern praise and worship, quote unquote, does not put much reliance upon and does not really want that sound of the background vocalist. A lot of that comes down to, again, your beliefs, your preferences, and your vision for what it is that you're trying to do. And so a lot of churches are trying to sound like the radio so they can get played on the radio because that provides exposure, it provides finances, all of those things. And so it sounds more like a band. And then, as I mentioned, do they want people to participate? And in some churches, the answer is yes. Some places, the answer is no. But if you're trying to get people to participate, then it begs the question, is having a very vocal heavy mix going to help people sing because then they feel like they're part of a group and they're going to join in? Or does having less vocals, more like a karaoke style, where you're hearing the instruments and you hear somebody singing, but you kind of feel like maybe you're the lead singer in a particular group? And each has their own merit, and there are different beliefs that you guys can, decide for yourselves. So by design, from the beginning, based on those preferences, beliefs, and vision for what it is that we're going to do, the background vocalist may not even have a fighting chance of being involved or being heard at all. Again, just from the sense of, we're not going to put you heavily in the mix because we don't believe that's going to help us, or we don't want it to sound like that. Or, again, in the perfect world, everybody else is singing and so we can't hear you anyway. Well, that's great. That's one classification. And it also creates a whole nother set of questions, because if by design we know that we're not going to hear you, then who do we choose to be up there? Because we want you up there, again, not to be heard, but to be seen. So this becomes what I would call pretty controversial, in the sense of a lot of churches then start choosing people based on how they look versus how they sound. And kind of steps on the toes of racism and ageism, because some churches will just start putting up people based, again, what they look like, and you fit a certain demographic in a category of people that we're trying to attract or represent, and from the get-go aren't really up there to be heard. Now, if everybody's on board with that and understands that's what they're getting into, then okay, I can see the merit in that, but you're basically turning people of your team into actors, and you're hiring actors instead of musicians. And that certainly pushes the boundaries of maybe some moral and ethical discussions that we'll have maybe another day. But again, I don't feel like most people know that when they get signed up to that worship team and are up there every week and they're dedicating. They don't quite know that they're not in the mix and won't be in the mix and never will be in the mix, and that the only reason why they're up there is because they have a certain skin color or are a certain age. So I certainly don't know how that goes at every church in America or across the world, but it's something to think about. And maybe we should do something about it. So we're only like halfway through this video and we're already saying some pretty controversial stuff, and stuff that most people don't ever think about, because again, they just feel like, oh, I've got a microphone, I've got my in-ears, I'm in the mix. You may not actually be in the mix and may never be in the mix. And again, if you're doing a great job, that's a good thing. If just by design that's how it is, that's maybe rough. All right. So all of those things fit into that category of, by design, you're going to be either buried because you're doing such a great job, or buried because that's just the style and the preference that is that we're doing. Now, the other side of all of this is going to be things that we do as musicians, as singers, that cause us to get turned down versus being buried by either the style or by our successes. And those things are some of the things that I've mentioned throughout the other series of videos on this topic that we've been going through, but the biggest one is going to be singing off pitch. And the main reason why most vocalists sing off pitch is because they have a bad mix of some sort that they can't hear correctly. And so what that means is that we then have to fix the core issue of the mix rather than dealing with maybe the individual skill. And as I talked about in that first video, we need to be able to separate. Can your singer sing on pitch when they're in a good listening environment? And if the answer is yes, then that means that you've got some sort of problem with your listening environment. So if you have floor wedges, that means that possibly you're sharing too many vocalists are sharing that same wedge, or what you have in that wedge is somehow masking the sound of their own voice, because we have this really weird thing that we do as vocalists, that when we can't hear ourselves, we will instinctively, without even trying to, we will raise or lower our pitch in order to be able to hear, because that's the only way that we can hear the difference, because we can't win based on volume. And so almost all the time, most vocalists have had zero training in how to set a monitor mix. We just give them in-ears and a pack and say, figure it out. And then they don't do a great job. And then we as sound people don't want to deal with it, or don't know how to deal with it, and we just end up turning them down. So if you have people that are singing off pitch, you need to find out, can they sing on pitch? And then if you know that they can, then you need to change their environment. And so maybe that means that you need to set up their mix for them and eliminate many of the sounds that they're trying to put in there. They don't need to hear everybody. They just need to hear what they need to get in order for them to sing correctly. And you'll be surprised by how quickly a lot of vocalists start to do really well once they can hear. But again, they need some help. So the other things are going to be some of the stuff we've been talking about, which is if you stand out at all in any way, you're going to trigger the whack-a-mole response from your sound person. Meaning that if you get loud really quickly, or possibly it's too bright, or you sing in a space where there wasn't supposed to be singing, sound people don't have authority or control to say, hey, don't sing that, or hey, maybe change the way that you do this. The only thing that they can do is they can turn you down and they can turn you up. Maybe they can brighten you or darken your tone, but there's really not a whole lot to do. And in that moment, the automatic response, again, that whack-a-mole response is going to be, I'm going to turn you down. And then once you get turned down, most of the time you'll get left down. So you got to make sure from early in the day, early in the night, whenever your service is, you got to make sure that you're not standing out. And so the mistake that a lot of vocalists make, especially background vocalists, is they sing the background part as if it were the lead, or as if they were singing like a lead person. So those are very two different styles of singing, and you need to focus on trying to blend behind whatever it is that the leader is doing. And that's kind of an advanced set of skills, but the more that you do that, the more that you understand that, the more that you're going to stay in the mix, because those little things, those moments where you pop out, is going to be your detriment. So while that could be a whole nother video and take a whole lot of time, let me just give you a few things. You know, if you were the lead vocalist, you enunciate all the words, you sing very clearly. You would say, oh, the blood of Jesus. And you would say d and s. Well, in some styles of music that have a very forward vocal mix, you would rehearse as a group and get all of that together to work together. So that way it's all sounding as one. But in our modern sound, we don't necessarily go for that. And so if you're singing your background part and you're being equally as clear and you're enunciating, what then happens is you get these, oh, the blood of Jesus. And those don't always line up perfectly because we have our eyes closed and we're not paying attention. We're not necessarily, it's not the style of that. And so a lot of what you have to do is not enunciate, and then you have to sing with a darker tone. So you go, oh, the blood of Hira. Now I know that just sounded like really dumb, but that's how I often sing background vocals. Now I sing the same notes because I don't have myself to sing along with here, but I did not enunciate the blood, and I did not say duh, and then I did not say j, and I did not say s. And so you end up just catching mostly the vowel sounds. And so you want to bring those in, feather those in, but you also want to do it in a tone that's behind and sits in. And so what that allows you to do is to have your volume be quite a bit louder, and you're blending that in there without sticking out and pointing out to where people kind of like, whoa, that's weird. Is that the melody? Is that not the melody? So the other thing you can do is not do all the ohs and woos and yeahs and all those things like that, because if that's where the electric guitar is supposed to be playing a thing, the sound person then has to choose between your whoa and the guitar player thing. Sometimes they'll choose you, sometimes they'll choose, but there'll be conflict because a lot of times those things aren't rehearsed. You're just singing because you're excited and expressing something, and those notes don't always jive in a way that's going to make sense. And the last bit of advice I'll give you as we close this thing up is that if you switch back and forth between being the main vocalist and being the background vocalist, which is our case quite a bit because my wife and I lead together and we will change just intermittently, you have to get really good at controlling your own volume. And so as a lead singer, you're going to sing a little bit louder, not shouting hopefully, but louder. And then when you go to sing background, you need to bring yourself down a little bit. Otherwise, your sound person is going to then start making those changes for you. And it'll just be when you're singing the main part, you'll get turned up. And then as soon as you're done, then he or she will then just turn you back down. And that's where you're going to be buried for the rest of the time. So you have to talk to your sound person, ask them what they're doing, what they need from you. Do you need to turn me down? Do you want to turn me down? Well, if you can do it yourself and then ask them, was that good? Was that better? Well, then you can get left in the mix. They'll just leave you up knowing that they can trust you. But most sound people don't trust their background vocalists, and they just turn them down, and then they'll turn them up, turn them down, back again, or they'll just turn them completely off when they start singing off pitch or they don't like what it is that they're doing. Again, you have no idea as the background vocalist, because you're in your wedge, you're in your in-ears, and you think that you're in there and part of the team, but you're just up there. And again, sometimes just for show in a good way, sometimes for a show in questionable ways. So again, that's all a lot to think about, as I say, every week. But part of that is you have to understand, is that what it is that you're signing up for? Am I here to lead people with how it is that I'm standing, what it is that I'm doing, how I look? Those things matter quite a bit. And a lot of background singers just kind of stand up there looking like a zombie or are trying to hide behind the stand or whatever and really not doing much of anything because they're not leading visually, and then we can't hear them kind of by design. And so it opens up this whole other world of how can we contribute to what it is that we're trying to do as ministry. It might not be trying to sing particular notes. It may be more about how do you stand, where do you look, what are you trying to do as a worship leader who is emulating what it is that the rest of the people are supposed to be doing. Well, as always, if there's anything we can do for you, don't hesitate to ask. You can check us out at musicandministry.co. We've got a bunch more information, books that we've written, videos, and articles that are all there for free. And would encourage you that God's got good things for you, and we'll see you next time.